At Wellspring, one of our core values is to be an irresistible influence in our community. We have engaged in this arena in several ways, and today we get a chance to highlight 3 of those ministries. We're going to talk about Guest House, Care Portal, and All-In Ministry. First, I'd like to invite up Kayla Frazier to talk about the Guest House.
Hi guys, like she said, I'm Kayla Frazier, and my husband Jack and I have been living in the Guest House for about 6 months now. For those of you who are newer here, the Guest House is a house in this neighborhood right up the street where we just provide hospitalities to our neighbors, especially children. So when I get asked what I do, I always struggle to explain exactly what I am to the neighborhood and who I am to the kids. It's kind of just weird to say, I just hang out with kids all day. But I really think my favorite part of my job is getting to walk alongside kids as they grow and dream and hope. I get to experience childhood every day with them, the hardness of it and the blessings of it. I was just really compelled to Wellspring when I first started coming here because of their intentional decision to have a presence in our neighborhood and to not ignore the realities that so much of St. Joe is experiencing. So I decided to put together a video for y'all so you can see the kids that I get to hang out with every day. I asked them the question, what is your biggest dream? And here that is for you.
I said take 22. My dream is to see the woolly mammoth come back to hear how it
My dream is to travel around the world, especially Paris, and visit the Eiffel Tower.
Ready, Lena?
No, my biggest dream is to fly to outer space and see the moon.
Can you retry?
What's your biggest dream, Danielle?
My biggest dream is to be a rapper, and the reason why I want to be a rapper because I want to help my mom, and I like songs, and I want to help my family, and that's all.
I want to be a professional NASCAR racer so I can go a little fast in cars and feel the wind blow off my skin. I am.
My biggest dream is to be a basketball player because my brother inspires me when he plays.
I just love that. I just love like the innocence of their dreams. And it's just so special that I get to enter into that every day. So we have some current needs and ways that y'all can get involved if you're ever interested. One thing that we're really passionate about is partnering with Edison Elementary School, which is right on 22nd. I'm sure y'all have driven past it. They have a sign outside, and they just need money to help replace that. They want to get a digital sign. Right now, they just switch out the letters manually. So this would just help the community and families stay up to date with events and announcements. And so if you're interested in helping with a monetary donation, you can just make it out to Edison and put it in our Dropbox. Another really fun thing that we started this year is meal train dinners. So we do it every Wednesday night, and we sent out an email to y'all, and you could sign up to bring a meal to the kids, and we just eat, play games, pray with them. And so we're almost over that for this semester, and we have it all filled up for December. And it's just been a really fun time. We've had a small group who comes once a month, and so just to see the relationships develop over time has been really cool. So if you're interested in doing this by yourself, with your small group, your family, I'll be sending out another meal train sign up, and it'll start in January. Also, we just have homework nights on like Mondays and Tuesdays where kids come, we do their assignments, and just hang out. Yeah, so we have a lot of opportunities. If you guys are ever interested, just reach out to me. Thank you.
Who doesn't want to see a woolly mammoth come back to life? I mean, of course, that would be the dream, right? Hey, I am up here today kind of in place of Lana Burnich. Her and her husband Billy head up a lot of our Care Portal ministry here, but they were kind of under the weather today, so I'm standing in. And I got this shirt at a Care Portal conference recently. If you can't read it, it says, "We get to do this." We get to do this. And everything that we're going to be talking about today in terms of how our church dives into ministry, especially with vulnerable children, I really feel like is something that we're privileged to do as a church. It's an opportunity that we get to be a part of. And so I want to tell you a little bit about Care Portal. If some of you guys have been around for a while and know about it, if you're new, I'm going to just give you a brief overview of what Care Portal is. You can put that first slide up there that explains it a little bit. Care Portal is basically a technology platform where people that we give access to, so primarily the Children's Division and our school system, they can enter needs of families that they have relationships with, and those needs get sent to each church in the network in Buchanan and Andrew County, which is about 14 churches or so now in our community. So those needs get sent out, and the point people of those churches can pass them along to their congregation, and then we can, if we have that need, we can actually deliver that straight to the home of the person in need and make a personal relational connection with them. So it's an awesome deal. The needs have been vetted. We know that they're legitimate. Most of the needs are centered around how do we keep families together. So from a preventative side of this story, we really want to make sure we do everything we can to support families who want to be together, but just have some hurdles to doing that. Sometimes it's financial. It could be bed bugs. It could be we don't have mattresses for our kids. There's lots of different things that could be hindrances that could kind of raise some red flags with Children's Division. Another thing that we do through Care Portal a lot is come alongside like next of kin. So grandparents, aunts, uncles that take in kids whose parents are struggling for whatever reason and try to keep them together with those family units. But a lot of times those grandparents don't have extra beds and dressers and the things that they need to take in 3 or 4 kids into their home. And so as the church in St. Joe, if we can step in and provide those things, it is such a huge benefit to those families. And I want to share a story with you. This is just, I had her just, Lana just pulled out a story of just a recent event that's happened. It says, recently we were able to assist a local single mother who was living in her car. A request came through where their mother was needing a gas card in order to search for an apartment for herself while waiting to be reunified with her 2 children. Wellspring was able to provide the gas card for the mother, and she was able to attain an apartment. Within a week, the mother was reunified with her 2 children. Another request came through for the same family where mom was needing assistance with the security deposit on the apartment and some other household items. Wellspring was able to partner with the Mizzou Impact Team. So there's several even college football teams that have gotten on board with Care Portal around the country that actually send money to different communities. So we're a community that the Missouri football team sends money to, and we get to spend that money for families here. Provide the family with approximately $400 for the security deposit, finances for laundry, and a few household items. So I want you guys to think in terms of this particular story. A lot of us that have grown up in somewhat stable financial homes, we have this safety net around us that when we go through difficult times, we can call mom and dad or grandma, grandpa, or brother, sister, say, hey, could I borrow $200 to pay this bill off or to keep the lights on or to do whatever and pay you back or however you guys set it up with your family. But you have people around you doing this. A lot of the vulnerable families in our communities don't have some of those same safety nets that some of us have in our life. And when something comes along that for us would just be a phone call to a friend or a family member to help, that could be something that could end up being end them up living in a car and losing their kids. And the church we have this tremendous opportunity to step in and say, no, that's not going to be the end of your story. We can help with that. We've got extra, and we're happy to come alongside you. The cool thing about it, as I work with pastors in this town, is that we get to do this in community with other churches. I want you to go ahead and put up the stats page. I think it's maybe the 3rd one that gives you kind of the regional impact since January of 2021 when this year started. So basically the first 10 months of the year, Care Portal has served 431 kids in Buchanan and Andrew County. That with an economic impact of $137,000. So every request that gets put through has a dollar amount attached to it that kind of tells you this is how much money you're saving the state if they had to go and buy these things themselves. Requests met, 210 out of 225 requests. That's 93% of requests that have been met. Just to give you an idea, at the conference that I was recently at, a community won an award for being like a community champion for Care Portal in another state. It's in like 27 states now around the United States. And their request met rate was like 85%, and they were getting an award. And I don't say that to belittle what they're doing. I'm just telling you that because our community, and especially the Point people at a lot of our churches around here, are just doing an unbelievable job. The hearts of the people in St. Joe are incredible. And so I want to thank you guys. Wellspring alone has I think, met about 50 needs this year. But when you think about 210, we couldn't have done 210 just as Wellspring, right? We needed the community of other churches in our town to do that together. And so I just want to share with you a couple of open requests. There is a request for a family of 3 in need of assistance paying approximately $500 security deposit on a new apartment. Another open request is a family of 3 adults and 3 children asking for assistance with household cleaning items, vacuum cleaner, and large plastic totes for storage. So what we're going to do here in a moment as we transition is we're just going to take an offering today. We don't do that very often, but we're going to take one specifically just for Care Portal to maybe help address these needs, but then also just to have some money in an account that when needs come along, we don't necessarily have to send an email to you every time. We can just go ahead and pay those bills for folks and contribute to that. And so in a second, we're going to see a slideshow. And while that slideshow is going on, some of the ushers are going to come up and pass that down the rows. If you'd like to write a check, just put Care Portal in the memo line and we can make sure it gets to the right places. But Care Portal is an awesome ministry. If you want to be, you're going to find out more at the end of the service how to be connected. If you want to get emails when these needs come across so you're aware of ways that you can step in and help. We also need people that will help deliver those items, make connections with families. If that's your thing, is like, hey, I'm a willing person to bring some stuff around and I love connecting with people. Guys, I really feel like in this whole theme of we get to do this, I think it's just very on the surface in St. Joe that there's a lot of needs in our community, right? And honestly, like all of us fit into that category, right? Every one of us that's here is vulnerable in some way. We're all needy, and we just have different needs. And some people in our community have needs for financial items or assistance in some way. Other of us have emotional needs or physical needs or spiritual needs, whatever it might be. But I love our city and the opportunities that are here to care for people. And I grew up in Liberty and was part of a church in Liberty for quite a while. And I honestly don't think I could go back to suburbia and live or do church in an environment like that any longer. Once you've kind of gotten yourself deep into the mess of, just what a broken and hurting community looks like I love what we get to do here. And it's so tangible and so real. And you walk out our doors and you see it and experience, what most of our community lives like and the needs that are out there. And just the fact that we get to do this with so many churches that have a similar heart is just such a blessing and a gift. And so we're going to see a slideshow as we transition here. The slideshow is of families in our church that have adopted or fostered over the years, and it's kind of a then and now. So you're going to see some pictures of like when their children first came into their home and then how that's progressed over time to what their family looks like now. So just enjoy this as we transition into the next part of our time this morning.
Can you guys hear me? There we go. Okay, we wanted to show the video not only to show all that God has done through adoption in our church, but also to show how it's tangibly changed families. Here at Wellspring, our mission is to create a new normal for the next generation. And I can't help but think about all the children in those pictures, both biological and adopted, who are part of our next generation. And their normal has been changed in a drastic way. Ephesians 1:5 tells us that God decided in advance to adopt us into his own family by bringing us to himself through Jesus Christ. All of these children's stories reflect the story of the gospel through adoption. I want to share about our All-In ministry. Our All-In ministry is built around the idea that we are all in for caring for the vulnerable. And it takes in a whole congregation to support the ministries you're hearing about today. Not everybody is called to foster and adopt, but everybody is called to care for the vulnerable in whatever arena God calls you to. Our ministry is divided into two parts. The first one is the families that you saw today. Those are our foster and adoptive families. And the second is a whole second set of families. They desire to support these families in very tangible ways. If a foster or adoptive family has a need, we send out an email, and the second set of people support them. They help us financially with meals, diapers, clothes, respite care, learning resources, and prayer support. Another goal of our All-In ministry is to support families after they foster and adopt. Because we know that Adoption Day is just the beginning for our families. One way we do this is through our foster and adoption support group. This has become a place for families to be transparent through shared experiences without fear of judgment. A place to receive words of encouragement and support when things are hard. A place to be reminded of why we are here and what we are called to do. This past year, Holly McDowell and I started a second support group, and that's for foster and adoptive families in our community. We were working to build community in our city through the realm of adoption and looking to come around people as they start adoption ministries. Foster and adoption is hard. I know that firsthand. It takes continuous steps of faith and total reliance on God. But if you and your family decide to adopt, I can promise you that we will support you and you will gain genuine community. We have several families here at Wellspring that are currently fostering or adopting. Our next part, we're going to have a little video where we show these families' journeys. Please be praying for these families and all our families moving forward.
Gives up control in so many ways, but I think God was just slowly chipping away at our hearts, because then we came to Wellspring and it was definitely on the heart of Wellspring as well, and I think slowly we started to see God softening our hearts to the point where we were saying maybe one day we'll adopt, but probably not foster.
And so I started praying about the possibility of going ahead with adoption. And I told Reed, I'm kind of feeling like God is opening that door, opening my heart to that again. And of course, he got really excited, but he said, kind of keep me in the loop. I'll be praying too. I think it was probably, 6 to 9 months of us, praying about it together and separately. Then COVID happened and we kind of put things on the back burner.
Betsy's a researcher, so she needed to have all the information ahead of time that she could possibly gather. And I'm more of a jump in with both feet kind of guy and figure it out as we go. And so it was really hard for me not to push Betsy. And so God just had to give me patience to wait until he had done what he was planning to do in her heart to bring her to the point where she was ready, and equally passionate about the process of bringing home our future child from another country.
And I'm there. Come talk to me. I'm just so excited about what God's doing and how he's working in our lives and how he's teaching us so much through this process too.
Yeah.
It's a journey.
Amen.
Last summer, I started talking about it again, and Jacob has always not really wanted to do it, and I kind of gave up after those conversations last summer. I had a conversation with another woman who was in her 60s and her husband never came around, and I was kind of like, okay, if this isn't, supposed to happen, it's not supposed to happen.
I started opening doors in my heart to the Holy Spirit, which is a dangerous thing to do. And so just for it was a 3-year process of, I was just kind of like emotional about it one day, and then I was like, okay, no, it's still not viable to do. It was just conversation after conversation. I just kind of was overwhelmed that I was not leaning in to the Holy Spirit, not obeying the Holy Spirit. And so, I just remember staying Sunday, everybody was talking, and I just broke down in tears and looked at my wife and was like, how can we not obey? Like, how can we not submit to what God's demands to us are? And so that was it. I was officially a green light for the first time, and we had some conversations and got set up with the documentation and the interviews and all that. So yeah.
And I would say part of it was, a year ago, Liam was young, and it, I think, softened our hearts a little bit to just thinking about children that are in that system and having more compassion toward them, just having our own children and starting to have compassion toward children in general.
God softened me to the point of seeing that, it doesn't matter if it is hard or uncomfortable, God is, it'll be detrimental to our family if we didn't foster care for Liam, for us, and then for whatever kids get to come our way.
My biggest struggle was, when we were looking into it, I saw the financial side of it, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, they got a comma in the wrong spot. There is no way this costs that much. But, in my life, I've never really had that moment where I can say, God, I'm going to be 100% obedient to you. And that was one step I had to just give it up to God. And we met with Bob, and Bob said, I told him my struggle, hey, this is really expensive, and I didn't understand it. And and Bob said, Bob's like, don't worry about it, the money will show up. And in my mind, I'm like, this guy is crazy. Ultimately, my obedience to God kind of proved what he would provide. And so at that point, I kind of really got that push to, hey, you be obedient to me, I'll take care of you. You need to trust my word, trust me, and I will provide for you. And ultimately, we've kind of overcame that with generosity of people, just money that came up that we would never have expected.
Adoption is crazy. You go through so many hoops, but it is nothing compared to what our child is going through, and we just will do whatever we can to save a child and bring him into a loving home. We're so excited about this journey, and we can't wait to grow in our community with our new children.
I just want to be open to be where God is and what his heart's after, and I want to follow him into that space, even though, we don't necessarily feel like we're the best parents or even have the greatest marriage, but we have space and we want to follow Christ wherever that takes us.
Bob, God. Hey, so we're going to get to meet a family this morning who is also in process, and we want to we're going to interview them live here and get a little bit deeper into their story. Ryan and Alyssa Van Belkom have been at church here for quite some time, and I coached cross country with Alyssa at Central for a number of years, and so I was definitely on the inside of kind of some things with them and what was going on, but I'm going to go ahead and ask them to come on up, and we're just going to have a little conversation for a little bit. So I'd love for you guys to start just by just introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about your current family and what that looks like.
There we go. Okay, my name is Ryan Campbell, and this is my wife, Alyssa, and we have a 5-year-old son.
Put that closer to your mouth. There you go. Okay.
And I think our picture's up there, so.
Yeah. She's one of those moms, right? The
one and
over-the-top
only year.
Halloween costume person. So tell us a little bit about kind of what got you on the journey of adoption to begin with. What was the initial spark for you guys?
I think we actually started praying about it in 2017, and in 2018 is when we were like, green light, like, yes, we're going to do this. In a lot of ways, it sounds like a long time ago, but it feels like it was just last year. But in 2018, when we decided to start looking at adoption agencies, I was actually presented with an opportunity to stay home with Jameson, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to work a whole nother year, and literally every cent I made went towards the agency that we chose. So in 2019 is when we actually went live with our adoption profile. And then for the next 2 years is when we were matched on and off again with a number of moms.
Yeah, so just walk us through a little bit about what that last couple of years has been like, just the ups and downs of that.
Can I actually have Alyssa answer this? Because the reason I'm gonna punt it to her is because she was much more on the emotional side of talking to moms. So I think you might answer this a little better.
So we actually got matched 5 different times with moms through our agency. The first time we got matched, it was actually a couple months right after our profile went live. I was actually at a cross-country practice when I got the call, and I was like, Bob, guess what? And I was just like, oh, this is like really easy. Like, few months in, got a match, now I'm getting a baby. But it was with a teenage girl down in St. Louis, and we actually like drove down and had lunch with her. We were matched with her for probably about 5 months, and then she decided to keep the baby in the long run. But after that, we were matched 3 more times, and those matches didn't last as long. The moms kept the baby or lost the baby. I mean, there was just like, I feel like every reason you could get for not receiving the baby we experienced. But this past January was when we had our last match with a mom down in Florida.
Yeah, and can you just walk us through a little bit of that? I remember I was actually doing a Care Portal meeting in Albany, and I was driving home one day, and you guys were in Florida, and I was on the phone with you talking through on the front end. I don't know if the baby had even been born yet, but yeah, talk me through what that whole thing was like.
Yeah, so, and what Ryan was talking about, how I was like kind of on the emotional side with things, every time we got matched with a mom, I was like in constant communication with the mom through texting, through FaceTime. So with this particular mom, since January, I had been talking to her. She was due in May. So we had been texting. We even let our kids like FaceTime each other. Like Jameson was definitely more in the loop on this match because we just felt like this was the one that was actually going to go through. And so when it came time for the baby to be born, we actually flew down to Florida a couple days early and hung out with her and her boys. And we felt really close. I mean, we talked daily. I talked to her more than a lot of my friends, just constant back and forth throughout the day. And then when she was actually scheduled for a C-section, we were in the hospital with her. That day, we had our own room, and after baby was born, he actually got to stay in the room with us, so we were right there up personal, front and close,
Yeah, so I guess just kind of walk through a little bit of just the process of kind of where that story ended, and then how you kind of navigated what to do with that.
I can take this so she doesn't have to answer all of them. So yeah, like she said, we were given a room, a hospital room, right across the hall from her. And so the baby, we were kind of wheeling back and forth. The baby would stay in our room for a little bit, and she wanted some contact with the baby. And so we'd wheel him across, and she would spend time with the baby. And so we were there for a night, and then the whole next day, and then the following morning, so it was supposed to be 2 days, the following morning the social worker was going to come by and sign paperwork with the birth mom, and then we would be able to take the baby with us until the court approved us to leave the state. But the night before she was supposed to sign paperwork, she decided that for one reason or another that she was going to keep the baby, and so she has 2 boys of her own, or aside from this baby, and she was just like, hey, I can't fathom giving up this child, even though in her mind she kind of knew that she wasn't in a good situation, and it might have been maybe best, but that was her decision. And so then we were pretty emotional in the hospital there, and we actually found out from the social worker. The social worker called Alyssa and was like, hey, what's going on? And we're like, we don't know. And so you tell us. And so kind of broke the news to us. And so we packed our bags and told the nursing staff there at the hospital what had happened. And even the nurses were pretty emotional about the situation. And we went back to our hotel and packed our bags there, because we had a hotel close to the hospital as well. And we drove to the airport, right? And that was kind of when we started talking to our friends in our small group. Our small group was huge during this process. I remember we actually had purchased a car seat. And so a few hours before that, because we anticipated taking this baby from the hospital, and so I had to go back to Target and return the car seat. And one of my friends on our small group called me actually when I was walking into Target. They were all praying for us, and that kind of started the healing process from there, because we had anticipated having our second child from there. So,
I mean, you all can imagine. I don't know if you can't imagine what a scene like that would be like. I mean, I, for one, was just walking on this journey with them. I was just shocked you were still in the game. By the 5th time you'd been matched, you know what I mean? All the ones you kind of lost before that, for whatever reason. So to get all the way there and, hold the child and be ready to bring him home, I mean, I can't imagine, what that was like from an emotional standpoint, and how you process that in your mind of, God, what are you doing? What is this all about? The why questions. So maybe help us, understand a little bit, like, what was your thought process there in terms of just what you did with that from a, God, what's going on kind of a standpoint?
Yeah. I think initially I was shocked, because I was like, what have we done wrong? And I definitely questioned myself, because I was the one mainly talking to the birth moms. I was like, what am I saying or doing or not doing well enough that they're causing to choose other families or to keep the baby? Like, I thought it was my problem, my issue. But after this 5th one, we just kind of felt exhausted, honestly. I was like, I don't think I can do this anymore. And Ryan felt the same. But like Ryan said, what was different in this last match was we felt heavily prayed over by our community here. Like he said with our small group, I don't even know if Matt and Brittany know this, but Brittany called me when Matt was on the phone with him, and they were talking to us separately, minutes after we started sending out the messages that hey, this had fallen through. But we went back to the hotel, packed our stuff. I was like, I can't even stay in this city anymore. We need to get out. I actually looked at Walt Disney World tickets, because I thought that would cure my sadness.
At least numb it for a second.
Yeah.
Yes.
But they were sold out, so I was like, I guess I have to go home. But yeah, we booked our flight, and I was like, we need to go somewhere and process this with Jameson too, because he left us at the airport thinking we were bringing his brother home. And so that's just hard for a 5-year-old to understand. I was actually so emotional, I made my mom tell him that we weren't bringing a baby home because I was like, I just can't. I just couldn't. So we got out of town, and we came back, grabbed Jameson, and we actually went to Colorado for a week. And while we were there, we started processing fairly quickly. And I was kind of shocked. He was definitely shocked because that's not how I process at all. But what had been cool is like through this process, both of us have gotten to experience a lot of healing from past trauma. I have anxiety really bad, and I had sought out counseling for that. And so I think everything that God had us going through up to that point prepared us well to handle what was about to happen. And we had everybody back here praying for us, and I think that just gave us like a really clear mind to process what had happened. And that first night, Ryan and I got to like sit down and share things that we had been feeling on that trip. And some of the things we were even kind of ashamed to share, because I was like, the whole time I was there, I just like had this deep desire to be home. And I really missed Jameson, and he felt the same. And we were like, that's silly, because we've been out of town before without him and not felt like this at all. Like, we should have been way more excited to be bringing a baby home. But in the back of my heart, I was like, I want to be home. And so just thinking through that more, I was like, we can do this at home. Like, we can serve kids at home. And so I was like, I think that's what God is trying to tell me. And so I actually told him, we were about to fall asleep, and I like elbowed him because he was dozing off on me. But I was like, I think we're supposed to foster. And he was like, I think you need to pump the brakes. Because it was literally, I mean, not even 48 hours after all of that had happened. But I was like, no, I really think we're supposed to foster. And so that week in Colorado, like I said, we got to process it more together, more with Jameson. And then by the end of the week, we were both pretty on board with foster care and just continued to pray about it for a couple months. And so that's kind of where we're headed now.
So the series that we've just been doing on Christ the Healer, what would you say in terms of any ways in which perspectives you have on God and this journey and how you've changed through it, how you've experienced some healing through it, or just any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I've loved this sermon series because I think it's just a great reminder of like what God did through our journey and what he's continuing to do. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't have experienced a bunch of healing with my anxiety and just how I process things without having to process things. And God gave me those opportunities as hard as it was and not what I probably would have chosen to go through. It definitely has brought me closer to him. And there was one Sunday you even talked about, like, God is going to also give us people in our life to come aside and help in that healing. And I've definitely have felt that here at Wellspring with small group, with the all-in ministry, just how many people have been on this journey with us. Like, we've definitely never have felt alone in that.
Yeah. Awesome. So what does your future family look like? What thoughts and dreams do you have about that now, currently?
We don't know.
Yes.
No, so we are currently halfway through our foster care classes. Alyssa kind of summed it up really well. We'd been pushing so hard for so long on adoption, and adoption's great, right? But we're feeling pretty emotionally exhausted. And I feel like I was almost trying to control the situation by pounding in, like, no, this is what we will do. And when it finally came to what we call a conclusion, we're like, are we forcing this hand? Like, is this really what we're supposed to be doing? So going through the foster care classes. We should be done close to Christmas. So after the new year, we'll be certified, and then we will be open to whatever comes next. We have room in our house that we're excited to share, and kind of open up our lives to whatever challenges come through that process. So,
anything you'd like to share with folks? Just advice to give or lessons learned?
Yes. We definitely don't want to scare like anybody off. If you are feeling called by God to say yes, say yes. You're not going to be alone in the process, and your God's going to be right there with you if you allow him to. So, yeah, if you guys ever want to ask us any questions or talk, we're definitely open to that as well.
Thank you. I mean, one of the things that we're really committed to here at Wellspring is just being honest about the struggles. These are not all just happy stories with bows, all wrapped up and pretty. But everywhere along the way, I guess why I'm so proud of them is that they chose to lean in to the discomfort of this. Sometimes when we experience letdowns or traumatic things where we kind of thought we had this path and we were trying to be obedient, we were going this direction, and things don't work out, we don't always choose to lean into God and what he might have for us, what he might want to teach us, the healing that he might want us to go through in that process. Sometimes we just decide that we're done, or we're going to escape, or we're going to numb ourselves with, going to Disney World or whatever. I mean, Disney World or Colorado. I mean, that's pretty, you go to Colorado. So anyways, that's neither here nor there. But what I'm so proud about them is that along the way, in these little places along the highway, they chose to take these little side ramps called counseling, side ramps called community and small group, and connect themselves to people that can help them heal and just have the relational network in place for when things got difficult. Folks were there, and they were on the phone with you. And so great job, Matt and Brittany, and everybody else who cared and loved and supported them along the way. Can we give these guys a hand? If I could get somebody real quick to come up and help just move these back over there. Jordan, if you want to hop up and grab one, that'd be awesome. I've just got a few things to share with you this morning. I literally have back inside of one little piece of paper. So you're not about ready to hear a 30-minute sermon. So brace yourselves. You don't need to brace yourselves for that. So I just want to share a couple thoughts with you today. Kind of Marissa was talking along these lines as well. But the entire story of the Bible is just one giant narrative of adoption. I mean, it's a central theme in Scripture. She shared a passage from Ephesians this morning that we talked about this past summer. We did a study on Ephesians, right? Ephesians 1, 4, and 5. Paul wrote this, "For he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. In love, he predestined us for adoption to sonship through Jesus Christ in accordance with his pleasure and will." John, when he was writing his gospel and kind of explaining the life and the ministry of Jesus in John chapter 1, and talking about Jesus, he says in verse 12, "Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God." And so throughout Scripture, you just see it's constantly filled with this family language. Everything that's presented there in terms of our relationship to God as him as Father, us as sons and daughters, us invited into a family, given a home, a seat at the table. All this imagery is there. And if you look at Jesus' ministry and just the stories of the Gospels, you see these continuous encounters with people that he invited to come and sit at his table in the kingdom of God, that he made room for. And most of those people that he made room for in Scripture, and including every one of us, were difficult people. Okay, you can think through, and I just picked a few, right? He made room for arrogant and loud-mouthed Peter. He made room for a Roman collaborator and thief, Zacchaeus. He made room for a prideful and murderous guy named Paul. He made room for several relationally broken women that were introduced to in the Gospels, multiple diseased and deformed outcasts. He made room for them. It wasn't easy or comfortable for Jesus to have all those folks at the table together, especially sometimes. It cost him something. And our seat at the table with Jesus cost him something as well, right? Our sin and our disobedience had to be paid for so that we could have a place in his family at the table. And it's his wounds and his burden that he carried, our burdens that he carried on the cross. And so now as we are adopted in, and we are called children of God, if you have received him and you are one of those sons and daughters of the King, Scripture says that we are now Christ's ambassadors, that we are the ones that now carry on this ministry of bringing others into the kingdom, of helping with this work of adoption and making room for the vulnerable around us. In the book of James, it's put like this. James writes, "Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress." Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is to look after orphans and widows in their distress, not to go to church or to serve or to give money or all kinds of other things, good Christian things that you can do. Not that those things aren't important. But pure and faultless religion is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress. And I think part of that is because orphans and widows don't really have a whole lot on the surface to offer us. Right? They're coming to us fairly empty-handed in terms of improving our status in any way. We're making room for people in our life that are going to demand things from us, that are needy. And God says, when we invite those folks in, that's when I know that you have my heart, like that you care about the same things that I care about. She shared a passage in Psalm 68 earlier. Marissa shared part of it. Verses 5 and 6, it says this, "A father to the fatherless, a defender of widows is God in his holy dwelling." And then verse 6, the first part of it says this, "God sets the lonely in family." God sets the lonely in families. At the beginning of that video we watched about Stan Sunday, it talked about the loneliness of mankind. Not only the lonely for a kid in the foster care system or an orphan somewhere in the world, the loneliness that they experience, but honestly, that's all of our stories. Our loneliness before we were adopted into God's family, before we knew that we had a father that loved us so much. And he sets those people into family. He doesn't just clothe them or feed them or put a roof over their head for a night. He invites them in and makes them a part of his family. And guys, the need is enormous. I keep fairly up to date with the social workers, children's division workers in our county. And I know the gap between the number of foster kids in Buchanan and Andrew County and the number of licensed homes. And I've shared this with you before, but to me, it's just unacceptable that there's, it's about 100 kids in the foster care system in our county, that in a town with the number of churches that we have and the number of followers of Christ we have, that we can't find homes for 100 kids in Christian homes. When our own story is adoption and that God made room for us, to me, that's just ridiculous. And I'm not saying that to make anybody feel guilty, because I'm talking about the collective church as a whole in St. Joe. I feel like we're doing our part fairly decently here, trying to make some inroads in that. But the fact that there's kids out there in our community without a family, that's just, we've got to be better than that. And so there is such a huge need, especially for teenage kids. A lot of those kids have been tossed around to a lot of different families. And the statistics on that aren't good for teenagers in the foster care system, what the future looks like for them. Our prisons are filled with kids who are in that system. And And so there's a huge need for that, not only in our community, but obviously across the world. As Marissa shared this morning, could we give her a round of applause, by the way? Man, how lucky are we to have a Marissa Purvis in our church community, for sure. But guys, we have a church community here that will support folks on this journey in ways that just most folks in American churches don't have. I mean, I would say the less than 1% of churches in our country have a staff person and a ministry committed to helping foster and adoptive parents navigate that process. It just is not done in other places. And so I want to say kudos to us here, our board, that had a vision for these kinds of things and have provided the finances for those things. So when you take this step of faith that you're going to be surrounded by people who are going to care for you. You can see through the slideshow that we had earlier, there's multiple families in here, myself included, that have been through the adoption and foster process that you can lean on, ask for help, guidance, support. Our board has, every year we put aside finances to help families who, through the financial part of that, we will give you money if you start on this journey and come alongside you in that way. And so this community is uniquely, just ready to help people through that journey. For me, the exciting piece of this as we watch the slideshows and see pictures and things like that is that, I always think I'm always future oriented. So I'm always thinking about who are the families in here who maybe even before today weren't even thinking about adoption or fostering, that was a viable thing, that are going to make that choice and are going to go through the process. And a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we're going to be seeing a picture of them with their child. Or we're going to actually obviously be seeing them coming through our doors every Sunday morning. That's just going to add the ongoing narrative of Wellspring of creating this new normal for kids. I can't wait to meet them. I can't wait to see what God is going to do in you as you step into that space and trust Him. Young people, college people, high school people, I just want to continue to encourage you. I can't wait to see the kids that you guys are going to adopt and foster one day, because you've been a part of our church community for so many years, and this is the normal for us. That excites me to know that as well. Guys, I don't know what God is putting on your heart with this. I guess I just want to ask every person in here, and I mean almost everybody. If you're maybe in your 60s or 70s, you can kind of tune out a part of this conversation here. But even folks in their 50s, there's folks that are close to that here that are fostering right now, okay? Would you at least pray about it? I mean, before you just kind of draw a line in the sand and kind of tell God what you're not going to do, could you at least just go to Him and ask and say, God, is this something that you have for us? Would you at least have the posture to be open to what He might say to you instead of making the decision for Him? And just say, God, we've never even thought about this. Is there something for us in this? And maybe He will say, no, you're off the hook, right? I don't say it like that jokingly, but maybe He says, no, I'm not asking you to do that, but what I am asking you to do is X, Y, Z. Hey, this family over here that's trying to adopt from Taiwan, the C words, I want you to write them a check for $5,000. I'm just throwing out a number, but I'm serious. What God asked you to do. Hey, no, I'm not asking you to do that, but I am asking you to be a family that maybe you can take in a kid for the weekend so that family can have a date or a weekend away. Can you be a respite home? We need a whole community of people. As we continue to do this, it's going to take more and more of you to pull this off, right? To step in and say, hey, we'll come alongside families and help. And so I just want to ask you to pray about it and just see what God says and just really be open to that. I'm going to have Marissa come. She's going to just help with kind of what are the next steps from here. So come on up.
All right, next Sunday, we're going to have a post-stand Sunday event. And you can come here to the church from 6 to 7. We'll meet in the basement. We'll provide childcare. And just come ask questions and listen to a few more people talk. And we won't make you sign on any dotted lines. So just come and ask some questions. We'll have someone there representing international adoption, domestic adoption, foster care, all in ministry, guest house, and career portal. If you could all take out your phones, and there's a QR code on the screen, that's going to take you to a survey. And just that survey is a place for you to sign up for the Post Stand Sunday event or sign up for care portal emails or guest house or to be on our all-in support team. So if you're watching from home, we're going to add that to social media here in a bit. So after that, if you'll stand and we're going to sing one last song.